Story 1. A couple of summers ago, I and some friends from university went to visit one of our friends' houses since we were going to a festival nearby and had been offered to stay over. Long story short, her family are extremely rich with a huge old mansion in the English countryside. As with any home this big, we had a bit of a tour around and were shown our guest rooms. Her dad began to tell us that the place was haunted, in a joking tone, and mentioned that when they first moved, their dresser had been left behind in one of the guest rooms, the one I was staying in. This was one of the only things left behind, and they'd found a lock of hair in one of the drawers. I'm not a believer in ghost stories, so at the time, I just shrugged it off as a joke, although it's still a bit weird, admittedly. That night I got into bed and began to notice that the air felt strangely cold around me, but there wasn't a particular breeze. The rest of the house had been at a perfectly normal temperature just before this too. As I slept, I kept having the most dreams. Nothing like when I'd normally sleep. I'd constantly awaken feeling cold. It was like when you're very unwell and find yourself somewhat hallucinating in bed while you dip in and out of sleep. The other weird thing was that this was the middle of August, and in the UK, we don't typically have air conditioning, not unless you're in an office or something. I woke up the next morning, and on one side of the room, there are two hanging rails for clothes. The guest room is normally used for storing spare clothes. Several of the clothing items were on the floor. The hangers had completely come off the railings, and I could have sworn these were all hung up the night before. Like I say, I'm not a believer in paranormal stuff, but that night has spooked me ever since. I've never experienced anything quite as strange. I do wonder if her dad's stories of it being haunted had planted a placebo in my head, though. Story 2. About 8 years ago, when I was a senior in high school, and two of my very close friends decided to break into this house that was down a back road we passed every day to go to one of their houses after school. The house was kept up, but no one had lived there in over 10 years at the time. And by keeping up, I mean the lawn was mown and the lights were always on as well. It was pretty well known in the community for no one living there, but the bills were paid by someone and no one had lived there in years. So, being teenagers, we decided to go check it out after dark. There was a driveway that led to a covered garage in the back of the property that couldn't be seen from the road. We pulled in just after 11 p.m. and made our way back to the garage we parked. A clean entrance and not a soul or sound anywhere. Since the garage was behind the house, we made our way to the back entrance of the house and noticed there was a plywood slab that covered the back door window top half. We proceeded to pry the cover off the door and revealed that the window had been broken before, probably by another nosy group of teens in the past. We had our entrance. One by one, we climbed through, each helping the last through the window and into what was the kitchen at the back of the house. Once in the kitchen, we moved to the eerily tidy living room of the house, which was sort of infamous for being the room in the house with the light on. There were magazines, all dated 1998, stacked neatly on the table in the middle of the room, and it was fairly clear that an elderly woman had once been the occupant. There was a sewing station, the decor, and more to suggest this. Well, we felt safe at this point. We had made it in, and there weren't neighbors or anything for half a mile in either direction. We sat around for about an hour, freestyling raps, laughing, and smoking a joint. We toured the rest of the house and ended up back in the living room. It was overall pretty creepy, but pretty typical too. Just seemed like a normal household that hadn't been changed in 15 years for some reason. This is where it gets weird. We were still cutting up in the living room and had turned the lights off because we were filming each other with my Lenovo laptop, something we did for fun all the time back then, so we could relive it and show our friends we had braved the empty house on the back road. When all of a sudden, there was a sound like an old guttural truck trying its hardest to stay idle. This uneven rumble of the engine. It's hard to explain. I thought for a split second it was the air unit's fan outside the living room wall or something along those lines. We froze. And I mean froze. We looked around at each other in the dark. Terrified faces stared back at me, illuminated by the laptop's glow. After about 8 to 10 seconds of the rumble, there was a squeaky, heavy truck door that slammed shut right outside the living room wall. Now we scrambled. No hesitation, we bolted for the front door that was also connected to the living room, because climbing through that back door window again would have been difficult in a panic, but the front door had been nailed shut. So we turned and ran to the other side of the house, into a back bedroom that was also on the back side of the house. We all three froze and didn't move a muscle. The engine rumble wasn't audible anymore, but we were trapped like mice. Huge bushes were covering every window, and the front door was nailed shut. The only way out was the way we came in, but we were scared motionless. We sat in that bedroom waiting for the police or the owner or someone to call out that, "Our fun is over, come on out." But that didn't happen. There was a window to the backyard in our hiding spot, covered by a huge bush. I was directly next to it. My buddies were very close to me, almost huddled around me, and could see and hear everything I could. And let me remind you that after the slam of the truck door, it was silent inside and out beside us, scrambling to the back. All of a sudden, chills go up to my arms and back, and I slowly turn my head to my friends, who looked like they were about to keel over from fright as well. Footsteps and crunching leaves were coming, slowly, directly to the window we were hiding behind. They stopped as close as they could get without walking directly into the bush. We froze again. Horrified by what exactly could be staring at us in this window, we threw caution to the wind at this point. We got up and slowly backpedaled away from the window and made our way into the hallway outside the room and into the area before the kitchen, where our exit was now back in sight. I think all three of us knew that something was very wrong with all of this, and I think getting caught by the police or the owner wasn't on any of our minds. This was very surreal and felt almost like a prank, because there's no way people of authority would be haunting us the way whoever was outside had been doing. So, fed up after what felt like an eternity of unease and terror, we decided to bolt to the window, in the door, in the kitchen all at once, and go out together. To either face what had been tormenting us or fucking run. Once we were outside, we counted down from 3 and ran past the huge bushes to our left, where our window stalker had been. I couldn't help it, I had to turn around and look. I turned and all I saw was the light beaming from the window, broken up by the bush, and illuminating a patch of ground covered in what appeared to be undisturbed leaves. This made my whole body crawl in a way I've never felt before, or honestly after. We made it to my car in the garage, and I backed out and tore away as fast as I ever had. There was no vehicle outside. There wasn't anything. There was deafening silence and stillness. We still are very uneasy talking about it to this day. Even writing this makes my eyes water and my skin crawl. I have always been a man of science and a huge skeptic, but I can't explain that night. There was something so wrong about everything. Needless to say, we never went back. Wow, I can't believe I took the time to tell this story. I've never written it out before. Story 3. Back when I was 9 or so, I and my friend were having a sleepover. His parents were at dinner, and his brother was out getting stoned somewhere. Anyways, it was probably 9 p.m. His parents had just called and said that dinner had turned into drinks, and they would be out for a little while longer. Anyways, we were young, playing Minecraft on the Xbox 360, when we heard his front door open. It had a very noticeable noise when it opened, very creaky, almost eerie. So we thought, "Oh, it's probably just your brother," and kept playing, thinking nothing of it. Then we heard footsteps on the floor above us. We once again thought nothing of it, seeing as his kitchen was above the basement where we were playing games, and his brother was likely there for mid-high munchies. But then, we heard another set of footsteps. We were confused at this point, But we didn't worry, as it was either his parents or a stoner friend of his brother. We then heard a scratching at the basement door. We both looked at each other like, is that just me? Or is there a scratching? He didn't have any pets. So me, being the oldest by 2 months, went to go check. I opened the door, and there was nothing there. I yelled upstairs to his brother, let's call him Jim. Jim, you're not scaring us. Stop it. No reply. So I sat back down and continued playing. Now there was a scratching on the window. We were honestly terrified, and we stayed seated, one of us looking at the door, the other looking at the window. Then again, scratching at the door. I opened it with a baseball bat in hand, and nothing. We barricaded the door and put things in front of the window. We didn't hear anything for the next half an hour and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, his dad came down and knocked on the door and tried to get into the basement. We took down the barricade, and his dad came into the room, furious. Why the hell did you guys rip open the screen door? We went upstairs, and sure enough, the front door's screen was shredded. We tried to convince him that it wasn't us, and that the brother had done it to scare us. But what he said next made our blood run cold. Jim wasn't home at all last night. We dropped him off in the city with his friends. My friend's house was half an hour away from the city, and none of the people at his friend's house had cars. I and my friend looked at each other and couldn't speak. Needless to say, his parents didn't believe us. They called my parents, and I and my friend had to split the cost to have the basement door replaced. It had tons of scratch marks as well, and the screen door replaced. I and my friend still bring this up to this day. Whenever we meet, Story 4. When I was around 15, I had a huge falling out with my parents and moved about 150 miles away from home to live with my aunt on her 500-acre farm in the middle of nowhere. I was home alone at her house often, as she worked and was recently widowed. One afternoon, I left my bedroom to walk to the kitchen. When I did, I passed by an unused guest room but was shocked to see a man sitting at the corner of the bed, staring out the sliding glass door at the rolling hills of my aunt's property. I paused in the doorway, realizing that this man looked hazy. It was like he wasn't a solid being but a thick mist made up of natural colors. Difficult to explain, but everything was colored normally. He was just sitting there, leaning over a bit with his elbows on his knees, clenching and rubbing his hands. He turned slowly and looked at me, and by that time, I had come to my senses and ran to the garage. I was terrified and thought I was losing my mind. But as I gathered myself, I realized the man looked like my grandpa, who I had only ever seen a few pictures of because he died 5 years before I was born. After I calmed down, I bravely went back to the hall where the guest room was and shut the door. My family has generally talked down about ghost stories and sightings for religious reasons, so I was somewhat afraid to tell my aunt what I saw. I primed my question, focusing it on her recently passed husband. Do you think if spirits did exist, he would come to visit you? She was a bit startled at my question, but eventually confessed that she thinks her husband does visit her. She said, sometimes I will walk down the hall, and right by the guest room I can smell his cologne so strong, it's like he's right beside me. I then told her about what I saw and how the man was sitting, and she smiled and said, I think your grandpa was just checking in on you. He came for a visit once, and that was the room he stayed in. He loved the view. After our conversation, I felt okay about what I saw, and we didn't discuss it any further. A month later, my aunt and I were passing through my hometown on our way to a wedding, and she said that we really should try to have a sit-down with my parents. I agreed, and things were going great when my aunt said, tell your dad what you saw in the guest room. I didn't want to, because my dad was the main person who was against the talk of ghosts, and this was his dad I was talking about. I gathered the courage to tell my dad, and I showed him exactly how the man was sitting and how he was rubbing his hands. Almost immediately, I could see my dad was about to cry. He looked at my aunt and said, Dad used to sit like that all the time. My aunt nodded, and then my dad said, he was always rubbing his hands like that, because they ached so bad from arthritis. I never saw my grandpa or a figure like that again. I also have never seen any video footage of my grandfather, only a few pictures, and none of the pictures show him sitting in that manner or rubbing, clenching his hands, so I don't know how my brain would have been able to create that movement that was super accurate. Also, oddly enough, today would have been my grandpa's 111th birthday. Story 5. So my boyfriend and I took a vacation to Colorado one summer. Please note, this was early August. Well, we go to the mountains and hike for a day in Rocky Mountain National Park. It gets to be late in the day, and we need to decide if we should leave the park through the main entrance or take the road loop to see more of the park. We had a bit over a quarter tank of gas, but we decide to do the road loop. Well, we hit the highest point on the road right at sunset. It's beautiful and romantic. Yada yada. Time to go. We hit the cloud line at the same time as the tree line, and the gorgeous sunset suddenly turns into a gloomy, creepy night, and we both start trying to freak each other out with scary stories. We're also a bit on edge, because we aren't used to mountain driving. So anyways, we drive and drive and drive and drive and watch our gas tank get lower and lower. We assume there must be a gas station just outside of the park, but alas, as we leave, we just keep driving into the wilderness. The phone signal is spotty, and we start getting worried about gas. After what feels like an hour, we finally start up a hill and see the lights of a town up ahead. Thank God. They must have a gas station. Now I remind you it's about 10 p.m. in the middle of the week in August. We crest the hill, and there is just Christmas. I'm taking Christmas trees up in the town square, ornaments from each streetlight and lights hung on the houses. It's Christmas. We slow down and pass a church, and through the windows can see a full men's choir singing and clap late at night in August on like a Thursday or some shit. We both get a horrible feeling about this town, but we need gas. We pull into the station, and my boyfriend goes to pee while I fill up, and when he comes out, he just hurriedly tells me to get into the car we're leaving now. Two men were taking in the store that stopped and just stared at him the whole time he was in there, never breaking eye contact. 100% freaky cult town, for sure. Story 6. When I was 10, I went with my parents to this campground so they could visit their friends. They had a son who I got along with, the same age. Sometimes, however, if there were other kids around, the son would try and pick on me to impress them. I and the son went fishing, and right as we were about to leave, another kid comes and joins us, and the son immediately starts picking on me. Not wanting to be stuck on a boat and teased, I decided to leave and walk back to the campground by myself. I didn't want to go straight back to my parents because they'd ask why I wasn't with the son, and I didn't want to get into it. So I just walked on this U-shaped road. In the center of U are campers, and on the other side, wood with a lake around it. At the very center of the U is a park. Perfect. I think I'll just sit on the swings until I think enough time has passed to go back. As I'm on the swings, I notice a path directly across from me. I get up and start walking along this dirt path. There are reeds on either side of me, and I have my hands stretched out as I walk the dead center of this path. My hands can just barely touch these reeds unless I move closer to one side. I walk for about 10 minutes maybe, and I get to this pond. Crystal clear water, and I have this urge to drink it. It looks so refreshing. I kneel down, and suddenly the hairs on the back of my neck go straight up. It was like I snapped back into myself. What am I doing? Why am I about to drink pond water? Why did I walk down this path? I start feeling uneasy, so I turn around and start walking the same way I came. Let me clarify. There was only one path, straight. I made no turns. I didn't walk around this pond. I simply walked to the end of the path, got freaked out about something, and turned around. Suddenly, all types of bugs were now around. I kept walking, and I noticed the dirt path is getting more and more narrow. The reeds and tall grass are now in my arms, and there's a constant buzzing feeling in my ears from these bugs. The path gets so narrow that I have to walk sideways to avoid the reeds. I yell out for help, and I hear a voice ask if I'm okay. I reply, "I'm lost." And a woman says, "Just walk straight, honey, I see you." I see nothing. It's just tall grass and reeds. I walk a few feet and see the road. I am scratched from head to toe, and there's a woman by the playground asking what happened. She takes a Kleenex out of her pocketbook and starts wiping some of the scratches, and I tell her what happened. I look behind me and see no path. I'm at the same park. I'm in front of the swing I was just on. The woman looks at me and tells me that I shouldn't even think about it and to just forget it happened because I'm fine now. But she emphasized not to talk about it. I've always been on the fence about it. I'm sure there was one path in and one path out. The bugs could have steered me off course. Maybe me being paranoid or something more sinister that nearly trapped me for good. Story 7. I used to live in a house with 2 roommates. Let's call them Anna and Erica. I lived on the 2nd floor, and Anna and Erica lived downstairs. Every night I would hear this thud, thud coming from downstairs. I would investigate, and it always came from Anna's room. I thought it was her doing burpees or working out at night, which seems dumb looking back. I never talked to Erica about it because I thought it was in my head, and since I was on the 2nd floor, it never really bothered me. Fast forward 2 years, and we all move into a new house with another roommate. Anna, Erica, and I live on the same floor upstairs. I start hearing the thud-thud louder now. I go up to Anna's door, and it sounds like she's hitting herself against a wall and whispering and crying or laughing. I also noticed when she left the room, she had her sheets all scattered on the floor. I asked my other roommate Erica about it, and she says she hears it too. Anna starts staying at her parents' house more often, but every time she comes home, we hear the same thud-thud noise. We started asking Anna about it, and she makes up excuses like, "I was moving furniture," or "My porch door was swinging open." After we started questioning her more, she only came to our house maybe once a month to pick up some clothes. It was so strange. I never think we'll get an explanation. Story 8. I work as an adult novelty store manager with a theater, so please envision the kind of customers I get. I had this regular who was nice enough, and we always exchanged pleasantries and small talk. One day we said goodbye, and as he went to leave, he stopped dead in his tracks and came back to the counter. He told me that he ignores it every time, but today it wouldn't let him. So naturally, I asked what the hell is he talking about. He proceeds to tell me that there is an older black man who is with me 24/7. He sees him every time I'm in the store. The older black man just stands next to me, watching me and smiling. At that point, a chill ran up my spine because no one in that store knows, besides my boss, that I'm half black, and my 65-year-old black father, whom I was so close to, passed in 2014. I said the usual wow and oh my God, so I wouldn't give anything away to see what else he says to see if it's legit. The customer proceeds to tell me that the man, my father, is sad about his kids not doing what he's asked them to do, and one particular child I have greatly disappointed him. The man, my father, also wants the customer to tell me how much he loves his wife, even though she's married again. At this point, I have tears in my eyes. Because how would this man know there's a conflict between me and my siblings because of my dad's death? How would this man know my mother has married again? He kept mentioning that he could feel a strong religious pull with my father. My father was a preacher. He told me a bunch of other things and asked if I was pregnant. I told him no, but apparently, my next child will have my father's soul according to him. My 2-year-old son looks like my father and loves his favorite songs. I have never seen that man again.
Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.